The Madman at the Darkmoon Faire. Alright, it's the star ratings for Rogue, Shaman, Warlock, and Warrior for Madness of the Darkmoon Faire. Let's kick it off with Rogue. Rogue has a number of tempo decks right now, and I'm basically going to separate Rogue's cards into two main buckets. So, the good bucket: Foxy Fraud, Swindle, Tenru of the Red Smoke, and Ticketmaster. All of these cards just straight up get 4 stars across the board. And they all pretty much go into the same deck. That's why they live and die together. I'm envisioning the Galakrond Rogue puts away the worst cards in the deck and tosses in these cards. Foxy Fraud obviously looks incredible. It's basically a 0 mana 3/2 if you play a combo card with it. Might actually cause the Rogue build to shift a little bit too, because maybe you need a few more cards with combo on them in order to run Foxy Fraud consistently. Maybe we see a return of SI7 agent. Foxy Fraud goes excellently into Swindle. That's like the proactive play that you make with Foxy Fraud. It's 2 mana draw too. That's pretty solid. Tenru of the Red Smoke is, I think, a good replacement to Shadow Step. There are pros and cons of Shadow Step versus Tenru, but ultimately I think as a tempo rogue, you are looking to stick your cards on the board, and ideally you get a little bit of value on them before you Shadow Step them back with Tenru. Tenru has the additional benefit that it's better than Shadow Step on really high cost cards, such as Kronks. If you're willing to forego the ability to immediately Shadow Step something with 0 mana, you're going to get a 3/2 with it, and I think that's a good deal, especially for a tempo-focused deck of Rogue. And Ticketmaster is just a very solid card. It's 3 mana 4/3 with the potential of being a total of 13-12 in stats. Now 3 mana 4/3 is pretty aggressive, so opponents are going to want to kill that, and when they kill it, it's almost as if it came into play with Battlecry. Yeah, that's just real good. It's worth mentioning that unfortunately Secret Passage doesn't draw cards, it just adds cards from your deck into your hand. However, it should still be a good card. You have the good cards, then you have the not so good cards. That would be Prize Plunder, Shadow Clone, Sweet Tooth, Cloak of Shadows, Malevolent Strike, and Grand Empress Shek'Zara. Let's just blanket give them all 1 star. Prize Plunder, it just doesn't do enough. Shadow Clone, it's slow and it's almost like corruption. Like they attack you and then you get one of their minions and then you're gonna do what, like trade into their minion with their minion? Blah. Sweet Tooth, it's way too slow. Just run Sneaky Delinquent. Cloak of Shadows, this is for some sort of combo or value deck for Rogue that wants to go late, but that doesn't make much sense because why would you ever play value Rogue when it's clear that other classes are doing the value game so much better? Malevolent Strike is for this Cthulhu Rogue deck, and let me tell you, I think that deck is really terrible. It's so bad that I don't even think Malevolent Strike will be tried out enough. And Grand Empress Shek'Zara, this is the Queen of Value Rogue, and Value Rogue is not going to be a thing, I believe. The only thing about Grand Empress Shek'Zara that might be useful is you'll use it to maybe get the tickets, and then you draw the tickets, you get some bears, and you'll also draw cards. That's a pretty good dream, but I think that the chance that you don't do that is just not good enough. Surprisingly, I just don't believe that a 6 mana 5/7 with Battlecry draw 2 cards in Rogue is good enough. All in all, Rogue actually has a number of really good cards as expansion. I feel like that's going to really solidify its presence as a good deck. Alright, Shaman, this is going to be a fast one. Entering this expansion, Shaman has basically no good decks. Are these cards enough to make Shaman suddenly have a good deck? Let's throw up the enhancement stuff. You got Cage Match Custodian, Deathmatch Pavilion, Pitmaster, Stormstrike, Whack-A-Null Hammer, and Inara Stormcrash. While I could see a world where putting all of these together in some deck could make it pretty aggressive and do a bunch of damage, I just can't help but compare it with Demon Hunter and think, wait, Demon Hunter is just doing this better. It's a very similar game plan where you're equipping weapons and you're attacking, but you just got outclassed, Shaman. 1 star on all of these cards. It all kinda sounds kind of okay, but That's the problem, it only just sounds okay. This reminds me a lot of my review of Knights of the Frozen Throne, in which famously people point at my rating there of Defile 1 star. And now we enter Defile. So Defile 1 star. In a world where Warlock sees play, probably a 5-star card, but in the Warlock does not see play world, 1 star. This is one of the best cards for Warlock control, but I'm not seeing it happening. Defile was actually only in the tier 4, arguably, like if you really wanted to be generous, tier 3 control Warlock. The deck was trashed there. They didn't have enough tools. And similarly, I think Shaman is getting a series of good cards in this expansion, but still that's not enough to make up for the lack of good cards, period. Like, are all these cards kind of good? Yeah, I mean, Cage Match Custodian in particular looks really, really good. In any other class with weapons, I'd probably give that 5 stars. But this is where this particular way of rating cards is important. If a card doesn't see play, it's 1 star. And Cage Match Custodian, while being a pretty awesome card, we're talking like Defile level, it's clearly a card that you play if you play any weapons in your deck. I don't think it's gonna see play because the class is bad and the other cards are bad. You've got 2 cards that are Control Shaman related. And it's Revolve and it's Dunk Tank. Revolve I'm gonna give 1 star. I just feel like Devolving Missiles is better than Revolve. Maybe Revolve could see play in some sort of Evolve Shaman deck, but that is not unfair enough and seems like a bad idea. You have Dunk Tank, the only card I'm going to rate 2 stars in Shaman. I feel like this has the greatest chance of success as the Shaman archetype of choice. Control Shaman might see play in that deck. And if it does see play, I still think Control Shaman is probably like tier 4. There's a Mimi Quest Shaman deck with Dunk Tank and Yashiraj and the Corrupted Healer thingies. That seems like it'll just die to any aggro deck. Seems bad. I don't believe it. There's Grand Totem Eyesore for the Totem decks, and there's Magic Fin for the Murloc decks. 1 star on both, by the way. Because Totem Shaman is currently not good, and Grand Totem Eyesore isn't going to suddenly make it good, and Murloc Shaman is not good, and Magic Fin is not going to magically make it good. The Totem Shaman, the Murloc Shaman, the Evolve Shaman, the OTK Shaman, the Control Shaman, the Weapon Shaman, I don't really see any of those actually being a force in the next meta. That brings us to Warlock, which I actually think is perhaps the class with the most potential to take rise to a really different deck archetype and actually have a bunch of success as a tier 1 deck. Let's set the stage first with the Zoo cards. Wicked Whispers, Midway Maniac, Free Admission, Minari Mosher, Revenant Rascal, and Ring Matron. For the most part, I think that the best that Zoo Warlock can achieve is tier 3. The cards that I think will go into the Zoo, 3 stars, would be Midway Maniac, Free Admission, Minari Mosher, and Ring Matron. Wicked Whispers, it's not impactful enough. It's too big a downside for buffing your board, and I don't think you can count on having a board. I think you just focus on having a board and then not necessarily buffing it. You just keep tapping and then keep throwing things on the board and keep like doing the value trades, the usual Zoo plan. A Revenant Rascal I think is not really a big enough impact to warrant playing a 3-mana 3/3 in your deck. It slows both sides down, and I don't think that's important enough to put the Rascal in. Now Warlock does get a significant amount of good cards for this new archetype of Demon Zoo. Midway Maniac is just a good demon. It's Voidwalker with +2 health. It protects your other demons. Free Admission is the big enabler for the deck. It's basically -1 mana, draw 2 cards, because you are going to draw 2 demons, and they will usually cost 2 or more mana, so you'll get a mana discount of 4. That's really good. Minari Mosher, it's an excellent card. It's 3/4 with a very relevant ability. It lets you life tap more because you get to heal while attacking with something big. Maybe you Mosher your Ring Matron for a lot of damage. Ring Matron is just Savannah High Main, which is so much better because it has Taunt. It's a good set of cards, but Zoo by default just has like a certain plateau of where it can be. It's just too straightforward of a game plan to really be that good. There's also Fire Breather, which I'm rating 4 stars because it's a mix between it's good in Zoo and perhaps it's good in Control Warlock. Fire Breather is a big part of, making this deck good as well. It's just a straight up 4/3 which deals 2 damage to your opponent's board. That's great. Now onto the good stuff. It's in Control Warlock that I see that there might be some sort of massive game changer. And I mentioned the Fire Breather. I think that could fit into Control Warlock as a nice AoE option. The main problem with such a deck was that it either had to have a very unusual combo-y win condition, but this new Warlock with the new card Ticketus, this could create almost a brand new archetype. It's a 1-card win condition. Ticketus, alongside Cascading Disaster, I think herald in a new Control Warlock that could be tier 1. 5 stars on Ticketus and Cascading Disaster. Cascading Disaster, that's just a good removal card, and something that Warlock may have needed to stay alive more. You use tools like Cascading Disaster and the other 26 cards in your deck. Literally the other 26 cards. You run 28 cards that are anti-aggro. And then you just simply run Ticketus and Yasharaj. If you run 28 cards that are anti-aggro and focused on making you stay alive, then perhaps you can defeat the aggro decks, you defeat the mid-range decks, you defeat the decks that are trying to kill you with minion damage. You just keep removing them, you gain a bit of health along the way, you stay alive, maybe you just win that way. But against control decks, all you have to do is play Ticketus, and then you play your Yasharaj, and then you play Ticketus again. This kind of plan was essentially, you're just trying to fatigue them. They lose 10 cards from their deck, could be really important and critical parts of their deck. They fatigue faster than you do. It sounds like a good plan, and I think that it really could be a thing. If there's enough control out there, maybe you add 1 copy of Philosophy, in which case you can Philosophy Ticketus, and then you can actually mill 20 cards from their deck, although that's probably unnecessary because by the time you get the Ticketus and the Yasharaj off, they probably only have about 10 cards left in their deck anyways. So I think the Philosophy is overkill. And then there's Deck of Chaos 1 star? It's a really interesting card. It's much more interesting than I had thought. I'm putting it into meme category, and so much meme that I won't even see play. Not enough play. But I have to acknowledge that there are some pretty impressive cards that when Deck of Chaos is played, your deck is suddenly amazing. The problem is surviving up until then while running a deck full of very unusual cards because of Deck of Chaos. And if Deck of Chaos is on the bottom of your deck, you basically just lose. I think it's a meme, but could be a pretty interesting meme. So I'm looking forward to seeing if this new Control Warlock deck could be the meta breaker. You focus against aggro, you win those matches with your 28 cards, and then against control, you try to win the game with simply Ticketus and Yasharaj. That brings us to Warrior. Warrior actually got a really insane card this expansion. Let's start off by putting the cards I would put in the Control Warrior on the list. There's Minefield and Sword Eater. Both of these cards are actually really strong, 5 stars apiece. Minefield is an early tool to kill off aggro stuff. 2 mana, deal 5 damage to just, not even targeted, you just basically AoE. That's really good. What is really insane though, and the card that you're gonna see Warrior play for the next year and a quarter is Sword Eater. This card is absolutely absurd. You got your Fire War Axe attached to a 1 mana 2/5 taunt, bundled together, which usually means you have to spend extra mana. Plus, it's a pirate, which is a really big deal when you consider Menagerie Warrior, of which several cards got printed for that archetype here. Ringmaster Baton, Stagehand, Ringmaster Watley, and Tent Trasher. Ringmaster Baton and Stagehand I'm giving 3 stars apiece. Ringmaster Baton and Stagehand are mostly belong in a aggressive menagerie deck. You can see why Stagehand is in that deck. It's a 2-mana 3/2, which isn't that impressive, but it gives something +1/+1, so it's meant in some sort of tempo deck. Ringmaster Baton is the card that ties it all together, potentially +9/+9 worth of hand buffing if you get it on the right stuff early on. Given that you can search for Ringmaster Baton with Corsair Cash, and this could be somewhat consistent. Tentrasher, 2 stars, I feel like it goes into this deck idea, but not necessarily run, may possibly be just not good enough to make the cut. Ringmaster Watley, 4 stars, I do believe that goes into both this deck as well as Control Warrior. A lot of different Control Warrior builds you can make. Perhaps you have the N'Zoth variant, perhaps you have the Yasharaj variant. I myself am more fond of the Yasharaj variant. One that doesn't use Watley, so that's why the rating isn't 5 on that one. I do think that Control Warrior will be very strong. Yasharaj, if you get back the Strongman and the Carnival Clown being the big one, if you manage to corrupt Carnival Clown and you play Yasharaj, you could get up to 2 more copies of Carnival Clown back into your hand. That's 4 waves of 4/4s with Taunt. I think that's a real win condition for Warrior. Well, Warrior, of course, has a lot of anti-aggro tools by itself. 3 more cards that have to do with Rush. You got Stage Dive, Bumper Car, and ETC, God of Metal. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Stage Dive, 2 stars. I think there's something to be said about Stage Dive plus Galakrond and Scion of Ruin. Stage Dive is especially good when you pull off Rush minions that copy each other, because then the buff applies to all of them. I think that the Galakrond Warrior, which is tempo heavy, can fit in all this menagerie stuff and actually be a pretty mighty tempo warrior. Where I don't think Stage Dive is going to be played is with the Bumper Car ETC God of Metal combo. Bumper Car 1 star and ETC God of Metal 1 star. I just don't really see a deck focused around rushing and dealing damage to the face while rushing minions as being a useful deck. It's an interesting theme, but I think it's a theme that needs more time to unpack. ETC God of Metal being the one thing that's rewarding rushing is not going to be enough. And then you have the super random miscellaneous Feat of Strength 1 star. It's a hand buff card for +5/+5. That's just not going to be good enough. So I'm a big fan of what Control Warrior and Control Warlock are looking like, and I have high hopes that Control is going to come roaring back in this expansion, and there might be this fun little arms race of trying to be a little bit greedier than the other deck. Will we survive against aggro while going into the greed race? We'll have to see. Thank you for viewing my ratings for the class cards of Madness of the Darkmoon Faire. More card ratings for neutral. Probably some of the more interesting card ratings for neutral cards versus other expansions, because after all the old gods are neutral.